"You're not a real doctor, Daniel." It was 3 years ago, the last week before our wedding. I was finishing a 12-hour shift at Travis County Medical Center, the kind of safety net hospital that smells like coffee at midnight and bleach at dawn. I was an orthopedic surgeon, not glamorous, not viral, just the guy who set fractures, stitched tendons, and told teenagers their ACLs would ask for patients they didn't yet own. She was Tessa, front desk lead in the cardiology wing. Bright, precise, the kind of person who could talk a waiting room down from a panic without raising her voice. When she'd said yes to me, I thought I'd outkicked my coverage. I ironed my only good shirt, learned the names of her cousins, and pretended the wedding seating chart was a surgical puzzle that would eventually hold. Then a cardiologist showed up in her stories. Dr. Richard Hale. Private hospital privileges. Glossy clinic. A machine for espresso and a lobby that tried to smell like money. 15 years older, a watch that could pay a semester's tuition, and a way of speaking that turned every hallway into his stage. The night she said the line, we were in my apartment with takeout containers sweating on the counter. I'd left my white coat on a chair. My name badge looked small against the pocket. She picked it up like it belonged to a phase she had already filed away. "Richard says you're good," she started, framing the word so it sounded like a compliment you give the intern who double-checks the orders. "But he's a real doctor, Dan. He decides. He runs a whole service, private cases, VIPs. You'll understand." I didn't shout. I didn't bargain. I watched the condensation slide down the side of a plastic cup and thought about the patient from 2 nights earlier, a roofer who'd come in with a shattered radius and eyes the same color as the night shift. The reduction had gone clean. His fingers pinked up like a time-lapse. He'd squeezed my hand and said it hurt, in a good way. "This isn't about money," I said. "It's about respect." I meant hers. I also meant mine. She put the badge down like glass and slipped her phone into her purse. "The save the dates are digital," she said, factual. "We won't lose the deposit." The door closed soft. Cabinets stopped pretending they were open. The apartment made the sound places make when a picture comes off a wall. Not crash, not drama, just the quiet shock of a rectangle of lighter paint. The next morning I sat at the kitchen table in that coat, like a man visiting his own life. The photographer's gift card, non-refundable, leaned against a salt shaker. Her handwriting on the envelope still smelled faintly like her perfume when the room warmed. She'd left at 11:21 p.m. I know because I stared at the stove clock like it owed me a diagnosis. Somewhere around midnight my phone lit with a message. "Mr. Alvarez, 68, part-time security guard, full-time grandfather. Doc, the cast feels tight. Tight good? My hand's warm. You fixed me." A photo followed. A thumb raised, purple bruising like galaxies under tape. Something in my chest unclenched a millimeter. Orthopedics doesn't trend. Plates, screws, reduction, rehab. Bodies don't care about status. They care about angles and blood flow. I put the gift card in a drawer and opened the laptop. I started to write. Not for Tessa. Not for Richard Hale's idea of hierarchy. For the roofer. For the granddad. For the kid who snapped a tibia sliding into home and needed someone to tell him the season wasn't over, just longer. The first post was, how to tell a stress fracture from a bad week. The second, what pain can teach if you don't make it your landlord. I wrote at dawn and between consults. Nurses sent me stories to demystify, PTs corrected my layman metaphors. Patients wrote back with photos of scars that had started to look like punctuation instead of failures. A retired surgeon I admired, Dr. Evelyn Price, sent a private message that landed like a hand on the shoulder. "You have hands that remember and words that don't lie. Keep both." By fall, local stations called when a youth team wanted a voice that didn't sell panic. I recorded a segment in a borrowed tie. People shared it because it sounded like a person, not a press release. That winter a recruiter from Hill Country Orthopedic Group in Austin found my blog. We built the toys. "We need a surgeon who can look a family in the eye and keep them there," he wrote. The contract wasn't a miracle. It was a door. I signed. I packed. On my last night at County I took one more consult. A woman with a spiral fracture and patience like a saint. She squeezed my hand after we splinted it. "You're a real doctor, hon," she said. It didn't fix anything. It fixed everything. The clinic at Hill Country had quiet hallways and scanners that made even old injuries confess. On Tuesdays I held a community slot, walk-ins, second opinions, people who believed Google but wanted a voice. She was there on a Tuesday. Big hat, dark glasses, a paperback held like it could make her invisible. I recognized her jaw before the posture. For 2 beats my body remembered the apartment, the badge on the chair, the cup sweat. Then my training took the wheel. "Ms. Harper?" I called. My voice didn't break. My hands didn't either. She followed me in. Saturday. Folded her fingers in a way I used to think was elegant and now knew meant buying time. "Right knee," she said. "An ache when I do stairs. A pop last week." She didn't say Richard. She didn't say wedding. She didn't say real. I examined the joint like it had never once been in the same room as my heart. Lockman. Pivot shift. Medial line tenderness. An MRI from a boutique clinic that liked dramatic language more than detail. A small meniscal tear that didn't need an operating room so much as it needed someone to explain what tissue does when it's tired and what time does when you give it a job. I laid out options. PT, injections if needed. Surgery only if the knee voted twice and loud. She looked at the floor. "You're different," she said, half to the linoleum. "You fill the room." I got busy becoming the kind of doctor I needed, I said. Boundaries were part of that. A flush climbed her neck. "Dan, I raised a hand, palm open, not a stop so much as a frame. "We're going to treat your knee. We're not going to treat the past in this room." I turned the monitor and showed her the slice where the tear winked at us like a paper cut. "You'll walk your neighborhood again. You'll do stairs without editing your life." When she left, she paused at the door. "I said something ugly once," she tried. "You did," I said. "It helped me build a life where I don't need anyone to tell me what I am." I wrote the PT referral and signed it in a hand that didn't shake. The posts became chapters. The chapters became a book. Inside the Cut came out the following spring from a small press that paid in belief and second printings. It wasn't about gore. It was about what healing asks and what it gives back when you keep showing up. Podcast called. A medical school invited me to talk to their first years about the difference between clever and useful. I told them clever saves face, useful saves function. They took notes like the idea might fall off the table and break if they didn't catch it. Tessa's name stopped being a door that banged in wind. My phone stopped looking like a test. I moved through days and clinic days with the steadiness of someone who had given up performing. I went back to Travis County once a month to cover a weekend list, part penance, part gratitude, part habit I didn't want to lose. At a conference, Dr. Hale walked into a session late, sunglasses on his head indoors like tiny hubcaps. He didn't see me. Or he did and let the seeing slide off. He asked a question that sounded like a speech about himself. The presenter answered it with grace. The room returned to the work. On a Tuesday, Tessa sent a short message. "I'm sorry. No qualifiers. No requests." I wrote back, "I hope you're well." Not forgiveness. Nice. Just the truth I could carry without bending. When my book tour came through Austin, the store smelled like paper and thankful air conditioning. People asked about pain and fear and the moment between cut and close when a surgeon's hands have to be smarter than pride. Afterward, an older man pressed my elbow and said, "My wife says you gave me my hands back." "I held the drill," I said. "You did the work." He laughed and cried at the same time, an expression I recognize faster now and respect more. The title Real Doctor found me in funnier places after that. A cashier who saw my badge when I ran in for yogurt at 10 p.m. "You look tired, Doc." Real doctor tired. A little league coach whose kid I cleared after a buckle fracture. "You're the real deal." A resident who sent me a photo of his first case closed with stitches that looked like patience instead of panic. I started a free Saturday clinic once a quarter. No insurance questions, just bodies and stories and a sign-up sheet that took names in pencil because pens can scare people who've been told they don't count. PTs donated hours. A coffee shop dropped off a box no one had to earn. Somewhere in there I met Emily, an ICU nurse who knew how to talk to families without setting promises on fire. She keeps basil on her windowsill and shows up with soup before you've decided you're hungry. When I told her I could be boring, she said, "Boring is what a heart wants when a monitor is beeping." We made dinner the way you make something you plan to eat all week, slow, with jokes that don't draw blood. A year to the week after the waiting room Tuesday, I took June, the hand surgeon I share with, to lunch. We talked tendon transfers and the satisfaction of a well-placed screw. On the way back, a man held the door for us and said, "You two are the kind of doctors who don't make speeches before you help." I wrote it down later. Not to brag. To remember what I am trying to be when the day gets loud. The divorce papers Tessa filed with Hale fell off the gossip cycle and into the clerk's office where all stories go to become paper. I didn't follow the case. I didn't need a second ending. On a slow Thursday, I drove past the old apartment. The tree out front had gotten tall enough to touch the second-floor windows. The building's paint had faded into a color you can't name but recognize. I parked for a minute and let the engine tick cooling sounds. The silence in my chest didn't feel empty. It felt available. In the clinic that afternoon, a boy came in with a fractured clavicle and a terror of failure. His mother looked like she hadn't slept since Hope went missing. I drew the bone for them, the way I do now, 2 curves, a bridge, a place where stress looks for the weak line. "This will heal," I said, "if we give it respect and time and don't ask it to be a hero too soon." The kid laughed once, a short bark of relief that made his mother cry. On the drive home, the sky over Austin did that apricot thing it does in late summer when the air forgives you again. I rolled the window down a hand's width and let the heat decide if I'd earned the breeze. The words, "real doctor," floated up the way bubbles do when water starts to think about boiling. I let them pop and vanish. That night I took off my white coat and hung it where it wouldn't learn to slump. I lined my pen with the notebook, my watch with the edge of the tray. Order isn't control, it's kindness to the next hour. When the kettle clicked and the kitchen filled with that small, brave sound, I said the truth out loud, the one that doesn't need an audience. I know what I am. And the room, honest as ever, said nothing back, exactly the answer I needed.